Racist! Fascist! Homophobe! Transphobe! Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and the rest of you. This is Jolly Scholar 888, dispatch number 11. FTX, the Democratic Party, Ukraine, and the acceleration of the globalist agenda. Now, I started this over a week ago, and since then, something else has come to light. So we can add now to that little title, COVID, believe it or not, and that'll come in at the end. It's going to be very kind of surprising, but at the same time, there was something predictable about it that I couldn't put my finger on it until I actually found it. So, okay. But this entry, as with all my videos, is simply another variation on my overall theme. The Great Reset. It's the culmination of global socialism, global fascism, against the Great Reversal that was ignited by the American Revolution and the continuation of the Great American Experiment, which continues to this day. Hopefully. Okay, so here we are, FTX. I'm sure most of you have already heard about the collapse of the crypto exchange FTX, and many of you might be familiar with the basic scenario that is unfolding. And also, tonight in New York, they had this book award thing that Bankman-Fried is attending. At the time I was writing this, people thought for sure he'd be in jail and he wouldn't be attending it. But as we develop this theme, as we look into it, he's probably not going to go to jail. And the reasons are going to be obvious. So, I want to contribute to this conversation, first, from my position as a definite crypto enthusiast, and second, my support for crypto and blockchain technologies as tools for opposition to globalism. My entire purpose for creating this channel is to explore ways that might continue the great American experiment if it should come to pass that America, for all practical purposes, ceases to exist. I don't mean to be too ominous, but the scenario is looking increasingly more plausible every day, as I mentioned in the last frame. So, in regards to FTX, what I would like to draw your attention to is really a follow-up to my Crypto Wars dispatches. We in the community saw what was coming, and now in the FTX scandal is playing out in a particularly dramatic but ultimately predictable way. We're witnessing the commissars, the globalists, and their dupes in open display again. When it comes to regulation, catastrophes are always a godsend. But again, this may result in a lot of regulation, but it's not going to probably result in Mr. Sam Bankman-Fried going to jail. So let's take a look at Mr. Sam Bankman-Fried. He's called SBF for short. So what is a crypto exchange, first of all? Well, don't have time to go into it in any depth here. It's similar to the stock exchange, the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, or anything, except it's specifically devoted to crypto. But there are many exchanges in crypto that are put out by different blockchains, and most of them feature, or all of them do, feature their own cryptocurrency or altcoin, which we discussed in my last videos. Well, that series I'm doing, and I'm still in the process of finishing, blockchain to metaverse. So, you can exchange cryptocurrencies on these exchanges, and you can go through the medium, which is, we talked about this also, stable coins. Stable coins are pegged to the US dollar. So, when people exchange, when people invest in a cryptocurrency, invest in a blockchain, or even a blockchain project, a lot of the projects are actually featured on the exchanges as well. So you can invest in them by buying up the, buying into the particular altcoin. In the case of FTX, it's called FTT. That was their altcoin. Now, they're supposed to keep enough reserves on hand that no matter how many people withdraw their funds after putting the funds on the exchange, which I needed to bring up, many people leave their money on the exchange. They leave their currency on the exchange, even their USDC, their stable coins. They'll leave them on the exchange and then manipulate, because it's easier, right? If you want to switch this currency for that currency. The exchange offers all these different ways. Sometimes they're directly in pairs. Sometimes you have to go through a stable coin. But either way, it can be complicated or it can be simple. But either way, a lot of people put their money on the exchange. So that's one way to lose money, right? If the exchange collapses or whatever, as it did, right? If you have all of your funds on this exchange, you're going to be in trouble. And the reason it collapsed was precisely because Mr. Sam Bankman-Fried was through the back end. The programmers had created a back end that they could surreptitiously, without it showing up on the blockchains, because we discussed before, the blockchains are in general very transparent. You can go on the blockchain and see what's going on, all the transactions. But they created a back door so that you couldn't see it. And of course, the only people looking for it would be people who are really in the know, people who are deeply into crypto. And they didn't see it either. But they did suspect it. Some people were suspecting it. And therefore, some other cryptocurrencies are being called into question that maybe they had something, they were also working with FTX, or they were fooled by him, whatever. I mean, it's pretty complicated, but it's also pretty simple. He was taking that money that all these investors had put in, and he was using it to buy up his own FTT, which inflated its price. And then with that FTT, he was investing in projects even outside of the crypto world, making massive donations to the Democratic Party, by the way, as we'll get to. And so these donations in FTT, sometimes they were turned into real money, say in the Democratic Party, by the Democratic Party, using taxpayer funds, right? Without questioning, is that FTT really worth what it says on the exchange? Anyways, you can see what was going on. He's basically stealing from his clients. That's the first step, but there's really more to it. And we're going to see as we go along, it's actually much worse than that. Now, Mr. Sam Bankman-Fried is only 30 years old now. When he started off, he was about 28. So everybody thought this was the darling of crypto. This is a genius, a mastermind. He's so weird, the way he dresses. He's actually well dressed there, comparatively speaking. And he has these nervous twitches that we now think is because of his amphetamine addiction. But, he comes off like a complete nerd. But a lot of it we're starting to see was probably faked. You're going to see just how interesting this guy is. But it reveals a lot about the whole woke side of things. So, he's the founder and head of FTX, 30 years old, largest crypto exchange. It's the largest crypto exchange in the world, by the way. That's why this guy's so famous. The largest crypto exchange in the world. And there's a lot of crypto exchanges. Supposedly worth $25 billion in 2021. Completely centralized. And this is a real problem that everybody was warning about. Because this kind of machinations can only happen on a centralized exchange. And I've talked about that, right? That I use CoinDesk and I really shouldn't because it's very centralized. So he started then a sister company called Alameda. And he put his polyamorous off and on girlfriend, Caroline Fisher Ellison, as a head of. And we find out she knows practically nothing about investment or research. But you're going to find out why she was there. It's not just they all lived in a penthouse in the Bahamas, them and 15 other polyamorous people, all of them having sex and drugs. More power to them. I'm sure they had a lot of fun. But you would think, well, he just put her there because he was his girlfriend. No, we're going to find out there's more to that. So anyways, they're in the penthouse of the Bahamas, 15 other polyamorous people. Seem like a fun bunch. So then these are the two main people, right? SBF and Carolyn. But there's a few others that are going to come into the picture as well. Definitely secondary, but, one of them maybe not so secondary at all. But it's pretty clear the mastermind behind this is Sam Bankman-Fried. So, as to be expected, the FTX scandal and implosion seems to be greatly accelerating the movement towards crypto regulation. What a surprise, right? In fact, many are suggesting that the entire enterprise may well have been a deliberate setup to get the regulation through, or to bring it to public attention and public outrage. And why do I think that? Or why do we think that? Well, as I said, you might recall from my first Crypto Wars discussion, the war in Ukraine inexplicably begins to involve crypto and ignites the first public calls for crypto regulation. And as we said back then, Crypto had nothing to do with that war and couldn't possibly have affected it one way or the other, so why were they bringing it up? Ukraine is now involved in the crypto in a way no one expected. That's right, Ukraine. Ukraine is going to come back into the picture with the FTX scandal. This is really interesting. But let's look first at some very recent, fairly recent history that shows us regulation has done exactly what? Oh, by the way, here was the slide for my crypto in Ukraine. Skip that one. So let's look at this, right? Crypto has done exactly what? Okay, we had a big crash in 2008, housing market, but really it was the derivatives market that caused it more than anything. This fellow here, Mr. Alan Greenspan, former chief of the Federal Reserve at the time, he promoted derivatives markets. He supported the derivatives market, unregulated, that many claim led to the housing market collapse in 2008. Okay, now, keep in mind, he and his direct colleagues, a guy named Wolfowitz and some others, were convincing everybody around them, including the administration at the time, that these derivatives should be left alone, that the market would work it out, that whatever problems they had with risk, they would be compensated because the market would eliminate the bad risks, etc., etc. They deliberately muscled out a female colleague in the department because she was trying to warn the administration about the dangers of these derivatives. So you can look up market derivatives, but they're basically a complicated way to essentially bet on the stock market and call it an investment. It's very simplistic, but there's even a movie done on this, which is essentially about the housing market, but really it's about the derivatives. But now we must emphasize, these people, Greenspan and his colleagues, were the regulators, right? They were the regulators. Lehman Brothers went under, but they took the economy with them. Nonetheless, some people also became very rich in the process. And Greenspan, the head regulator, he was all in on it. I mean, of course, it's never been proven. But he comes after the fact and kind of hangs his head down, kind of like you're going to see Bankman-Fried do. It's I made a mistake. I made a mistake. He said, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Really? He didn't get fired, though. He didn't get sued. He didn't get his pension removed. I mean, people lost entire fortunes. A lot of them were homeowners. He's sorry, I'm sure. He laughed all the way to the bank. And so now let's take a look at another fellow you might have heard of, Mr. Bernie Madoff. Now, Mr. Bernie Madoff led the biggest Ponzi scam on the planet. Probably has now just been lost that position to the FTX scam, because it's basically a Ponzi scheme as well. So, my question is, what good did regulations do? No one, none of the regulators saw the enormous scam he was running. Really? If true, then you have to ask the obvious question, what good do regulations and regulatory agents do? How did they miss this? Obviously, Madoff thought he could get away with the scam, and he almost did. Guess who blew the whistle on him? The regulators? No, his sons. I bet the regulators actually were only forced to act once his sons blew the cover. Again, that's my opinion. His sons blew the whistle on him, not the regulators. They came after the fact. Oh my gosh. Yeah. He did go to jail because this was just so criminal. I mean, how could he not? He hadn't quite greased the palms of the Democratic Party well enough. So keep in mind then, regulation equals control. Let's see, I missed something here. Yeah, there we go. These are the two of them together, right? So in the first, right, regulation equals control. That's just my little meme there. Regulators are the gatekeepers that facilitate monopolies and function to carry out schemes with government support and minimal risk. Minimal risk to who? To the schemers, of course. And of course, to the government, people working for the government, because it's the taxpayer that gets handed the bill, right? Greenspan lost his pension? Hell no. There's really no upside, as far as I can tell, to regulations. None whatsoever. So now we go back to the present, because this is going to be interesting. I want you to take a look at this. Well, first I got to move my fat head out of the way. Okay, take a look at this. These are the top donors. These are the top donors to the midterm elections. And you see in gray that there are more of the top 12 or whatever it is, more of them are Republican. Well, that's true. But in quantities of money, they're just barely ahead. And guess who the two biggest donors are? You'll be shocked to know that the biggest donor is none other than George Soros. Right? Nobody is surprised about that. But the second biggest donor to the Democratic Party, right there, Mr. Sam Bankman-Fried. Mr. Sam Bankman-Fried, really. He wasn't even 30 years old at the time. He was head of the largest crypto exchange on the planet. So how much exactly did he give, by the way? Well, let's take a look. Get my head back out of the way. 11 million straight to the Biden administration. 11 million, not bad. 60 million to the midterms. Excuse me a second, you know, when I start to talk and I let this cigar go out. So, 11 million to Biden, 60 million to the midterms. And he promised 1 billion towards the 2024 election. Wait till you hear what he says about woke. I mean, it's going to get funny, actually, very funny. He professed adherence to a philosophy called effective altruism. And wait, when you think about laughing all the way to the bank, remember that term, effective altruism. It was started by some pseudo-philosopher economist, just another globalist activist pretending to be an academic or whatever, and a good guy, right? Goodwill to men, and you know, kind of perversion of Christian ethics. Sorry. Okay. And of course, he was a vegan. Effective altruist, vegan, supported climate change activism big time, and COVID and pandemic. Now, when I originally wrote these notes, the COVID's going to come back in a really interesting way. Something that I was starting to get a weird feeling about. But wait till you see where this goes. So he advocated putting money into all the right causes. And we're going to see how cynical that is towards the end. He was laughing all the way to the bank. But will he laugh all the way to jail? Or will he even go to jail? Look at that. Are you kidding? 11 billion to Biden? 60 million to the midterms? You think he's going to go to jail? I doubt it. So far, Biden and his sons haven't even been investigated, much less charged, much less arrested or go to jail. Come on. But there's more to his involvement with the Democratic Party and the woke causes, as you're going to see. So let's take a look at some of that more. This is a good one here. Here we see, let me get my fat head out of the way again. I'll actually just turn myself off here. You can hear me. This is Gabe Bankman-Fried. He is the brother of Sam Bankman-Fried. He's the founder and director of Guarding Against Pandemics. But prior to that, he was a staffer on Capitol Hill and worked for Civis Analytics, where he improves private housing, increasing and source allocation models. Here's the important part. Democratic Political Action Committee and large donors giving hundreds of millions of dollars in the 2018 midterm elections. In other words, he was involved with raising the money for the midterm elections. And he's involved with pandemic, right? Guarding against pandemics. So let's take a look. Let's look a little deeper now. Okay, I'm back here. Before the FTX collapse, the founder, that's SBF, poured millions into pandemic prevention. Okay, and here's data for progress on Guardians Against Pandemics. That's his brother's organization. Voters see pandemic preparedness as important to include reconciliation and trust Democrats on the issue, blah, 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 blah. But here's the interesting thing. The Biden administration set aside some $30 million for pandemic prevention. And Mr. Gabe Bankman-Fried just happened to be working on Capitol Hill. And then he founded this interesting little company guarding against pandemics. And previous to that, he was involved in fundraising for the Democratic Party. So you can see that this is looking really nice, right? So he founded the activist company. He worked as a staffer. I say before he founded the activist company, he worked as a staffer for the Democratic Party. And there's the $30 million pandemic prevention program started by the Biden administration. FTX poured millions into pandemic prevention. Now, whether it went straight into this company, I don't know. But obvious, the connection is obvious, because his brother, and I think the people who wrote this, founder poured millions into pandemic prevention, in this article, they don't know that his brother is the head of the pandemic prevention, organization funded by the Democratic Party. It was funded by the Democratic Party, that's for sure. So, let's move on. Things will get even better. This is a Miss Liz Wheeler. I like her a lot. She's done some really great work. I'm going to have links to all of these sources because some of them are new to you. Right? I gave you that video on influencers that I pay attention to. She wasn't on that list, but she will be on this one. So she asked the obvious question. Why would a major crypto exchange encourage government regulation? Duh. Why would a major crypto exchange encourage government regulation? Remember in the Ukraine, the war on the crypto wars, I said I got really angry when I realized that FTX was supporting crypto regulation. And they were capitulating to the idea that we're going to destroy the Russian economy and we're going to block their access to cryptocurrencies, which they had already said there wasn't enough liquidity in the currencies in the whole market to make any difference, right? And I also pointed out that if there's one thing cryptocurrency is not designed to do, that's not why it came into being, is to ruin the economy of a particular country that we don't like, or bankrupt certain oligarchs that we don't like. That's not what cryptocurrency is designed for. It's designed for the opposite. There's no one who can do that. At any rate, so SBF was one of the first of these that actually got on board with it. And at the time, I said, I didn't like FTX that much anyways, and then I really didn't like it. So the next question that you want to ask is, how did Sam Bankman-Fried get to be a consultant with, get ready, Gary Gensler, the chair of the SEC, an organization that is going to be regulating crypto, or is trying to very much? How did he get into that position? You're going to see how. It's very interesting. But doesn't that remind you of anyone? Remember Fink and BlackRock having a cozy relationship, consultation with the Fed under Greenspan? And then Greenspan, the Fed, and the derivatives market, maybe? You see how this works? This is what I'm saying. Regulation equals control. Regulators are gatekeepers. They're controllers. So Ms. Wheeler comes up with a really beautiful little meme, this. Incentivize and reward, freeze and control. Right? And we're going to go and talk about how Guy of Coin Bureau, the idea that bad behavior is usually incentivized, especially in the economic world, which is what leads to a lot of excesses, including the kind of consumer culture that is just out of, that just doesn't make any sense. People making things that nobody needs in quantities that are ridiculous. It's because it's incentivized and rewarded. So here we're seeing incentivization and reward for collaborators with the Blue Party, exactly. And then freeze and control those who dare get in the way. We saw that, by the way, Wheeler is Canadian. We saw that with the truckers, right? Freeze their assets, control their behavior. We talked about that at length in the last video, where the one that I talk about CBDCs, right? They can economically paralyze you. And she put this really nicely. Incentive and reward, freeze and control. So, the same organization that seeks to set the agenda for the entire Western world. Who would that be? Who would that be? The World Economic Forum. So, how is the World Economic Forum related to the FTX. Okay, hold on a second. The same organization calling for a new world order that they themselves are designing. The same organization that shows up at the G20, even though, unlike the heads of the 20 governments of the meeting, Klaus Schwab and the WEF were never elected by anyone. Now, they're saying he wasn't at the G20. No. He was at the B20, which is the business counterpart to the G20, right? Which everybody knew the G20 was really, that's what it was to start with. And both of them were being held at the same time in Bali. And yes, Klaus Schwab was fraternizing with the exact same people. Come on. I mean, they're not even trying to hide this stuff anymore. So, did SBF and FTX, that is Sam Bankman-Fried and the FTX, have a relationship with the World Economic Forum? That's a good question, isn't it? Well, yes, they did. But wait a minute. How did this come about? This is Linda Fried. She is involved with Global Future Council on the Future of Human Enhancement. Ooh, that even sounds bad. Future Human Enhancement, World Economic Forum. It's a pretty high position in the forum, and there's more. Look at this. Yeah, this is the World Economic Forum. They scrubbed this, right? You can't find this page anymore. There it is, FTX, World Economic Forum. Join us. A partner with the World Economic Forum. His aunt has a high position, and it has to do with disease. That's her main field of expertise. Gerontology, geriatrics, but epidemiology, which is not really, it's epidemics per se, right? It's disease. Looking good, huh? So, let's now go back to Ukraine. I'm going to introduce here, right? We talked about, yeah, here we go. This is rich. Bankrupt FTX partnered with Ukraine government to raise $200 million. And then it was deleted from the website. And it shows that the donations were used for media campaigns and confidential items. Now, I have another, a new group of influencers, a couple that we're going to get to. Their name is Redacted. And they pointed out this really insane media campaign conducted by Zelensky that nobody knows. For instance, you've seen the fact that he supposedly is out in the middle of a battlefield, right on the front, and he's got his flak jacket, and yes, this president is out there on the front lines. No, he wasn't. It was all green screen. Can you believe that? I guess that's what they mean by media campaigns and confidential items. Now that's interesting. FTX is contributing money for confidential items? Okay. So we get here to our good friend, Steve Turley. I've mentioned him in the past. A very good source for all kinds of good news. He's the one that bringing this out. Here you see on the Ukrainian website, their bank is called Everstate. And here's FTX. Don't leave Ukraine alone with the enemy. Well, how about don't leave the Donbass alone with the enemy? Because the Azov battalion were in fact Nazis. And they were in fact the ones that had been fighting in the Donbass all this time against the Russians, the Russian-speaking peoples. That's another story. We can get to that. But you need to really, if you don't know anything about the Donbass region and the Crimea, it will change your mind about Ukraine. And then, of course, the fact that the Azov battalion, they're neo-Nazis. They don't make any bones about it. And they're the thugs that Zelensky has been sicking on the Donbass. Of course, they were already fighting them for the last 10 years. We'll probably do a video on that because there's a lady who has been studying that for a long time. Well, she's been there. But at any rate, you'll get the irony here that we have a Jewish president in the Ukraine, and he's allowing these people didn't vote for him, believe me. The Azov battalion Nazis do his dirty work in the Donbass. Curious, to say the least. Okay, but here's the part that really gets interesting. Now, this particular flowchart has been done by others. I'm not sure where the original one was. But here's Turley's take on this, and he's very good with his research. He does a lot of research. He's got a good team. So, Notice on his website, the FTX publicly thanked FTX, and they did a glowing tweet for their work in Ukraine. So what's FTX doing in Ukraine? And of course, he and Zelensky share what? Never mind. So why would the Ukraine government be spending money in the middle of a devastating war for media campaigns? And as I said, what the hell are confidential items? But the strangest part of all, watch. FTX gives money not directly to Ukraine, because remember, he's giving fake money in the form of FTT, which is the cryptocurrency of his exchange, of which he has been pilfering all their money out. So that token, FTT, it has no value, but people don't know it. See, if they look at the exchange, it looks very valuable. So he gives millions of dollars to the Democratic Party, but it's in FTT. The Democratic Party turns it into real money, which they get from the taxpayers. Right? I mean, they're not taking their own money out of their pockets. They're using the taxpayers' money to buy the FTT. Well, not buy it. I don't want to translate the words escaping me. They turn the FTT into US dollars. So they're turning a useless currency into a currency that is not useless yet. Sorry, I'm being a little sarcastic there, but a useless currency into a dollar, right? Valuable currency. Then they send this to the Biden administration, who's conducting the war, right? There's been no declared war, so it all goes through the Biden administration, of which he has already given $11 million. The administration then gives all this money, tons of money, to the Ukraine. So far, if you don't know that that money that Bankman-Fried gave the Democratic Party is actually fake money, you say, okay, he gave the money to them, blah, blah, blah. But here's the part that gets really rich. Ukraine sends money, a portion, back to FTX. What? What? How does that work? Why would the Ukrainian government, in the middle of a war, this devastating them, send money back to FTX? Are they paying somebody back? Well, who? Well, part of it, now, let me make this clear. This is incontrovertible, as Mr. Charlie says. That's documented. This step is documented. This step is documented. This step is documented. It's documented. This is for sure. We may never find out why they were sending money back to them, but that they did is documented. We know this. So what's the question then, that this thing keeps going around? That means he is sending money back to individuals in the Democratic Party that helped him out to conduct this, which would imply that they knew the money was no good. But it didn't matter because they replaced his FTT with US dollars. And then some of that money goes back to him. Probably he pockets some of it. And then real money now goes back because the Ukrainian bank, Everbank, which as we said, Everbank is celebrating FTT on their website. They're turning that money, I don't know if it's into Ukrainian, and then they send the Ukrainian money, which is still good. I mean, I'm sure it's backed by the dollar. At any rate, they're sending him real money. So he's replacing in his own bank account probably his fake money with real money. But more importantly, real money then is going back to the Democratic Party. To who? So this part may be somewhat speculative. This part is not. And this is the incriminating piece right there. Why in the world is the Ukrainian government sending this 29, 28-year-old billionaire scammer money? Ukraine's not full of scammers, is it? Come on, don't be cynical. He's fighting for freedom. So, yeah, I already showed this, but there we go. Don't leave home without it. That's Everbank right there. That's FTX right there. And this is 200 million going. That's just from him. All right, we've said billions. So, let's take a look. Now, let's go on to, this is a couple that I have discovered recently. They're called Redacted. And it's Natalie Clayton, Sorry, it's Natalie and Clayton. Clayton, I keep thinking it's the last name. It's not. It's Natalie and Clayton Morris. Interestingly enough, they operate out of Portugal, but they're Americans. So they've done some excellent work. I really recommend them. You probably have no idea what's going on, for instance, in Haiti. Well, we're about to invade Haiti. Well, we've had troops on the ground there, and no one has been covering that. What's going on in Brazil, the massive resistance against, they're saying that that's fraud. Bolsonaro was cheated from the election. There's all kinds of good reason to support this. The guy that actually won the election, it was a convicted felon. I mean, it's insane. A convicted felon from robbing money in the government. So anyways, it's been like a month now, and there's been millions of people in Brazil. Have you heard of this? Of course not. So anyways, let's read this. The Ukrainian government mysteriously disappeared online records of its fundraising arrangement with the FTX crypto scam just days before the scandal erupted. The initiative claims to have raised $60 million for Ukraine. But where did the money go? Well, as you know, $60 million FTX gave to the Democratic Party for the midterms. I don't know if that number maybe just came up again. I doubt he was reimbursed his full $60 million, because if he was, that then really suggests that everybody who was involved in the Democratic Party with this, the movement of this money, knew from the start that the FTT coin was worthless, and that all the $60 million he gave them was zero. It wasn't any good until it was turned into real money. And then they pocketed a lot of the real money, or it went around the circle, and then they got it that way. But whatever it is, $60 million raised. And what's interesting here is that it got scraped from the website before the scandal broke. So evidently, all the way in Ukraine, they were onto things that most people in the United States had no idea, including many people in the crypto sphere. Now, some were looking at the books and saying something's not right here, but most people in the crypto sphere had no idea, and we're going to see an example of that in just a minute. So this is really curious. So we go back then to this little flow chart, right? 60 million disappears. No one knows where it went, but money is going back to Mr. Fried. How is that possible? If this is all donation, it's all for Ukraine fighting the war of aggression that the Russians are conducting against the poor people. Why would they be sending money back? That's rich, isn't it? But okay, we move on. Here's another group that I like to bring to your attention, Altcoin Daily. Very good with the mechanics of the whole crypto sphere, especially with altcoins. So that's their specialty, right? Rather than a lot of people really specialize, are called Bitcoin maxims. These people are really exploring the very exciting world of the altcoins, and that's where most of the FTX, that's where all the damage, that's where all the excitement happens, and some of it is not good. But nonetheless, they're not as much on the whole world scheme of things, so much like Coin Bureau is, but they're actually pretty good at that too. So, U.S. taxpayer money was funneled to Ukraine, to the Everstake Bank, blah, blah, blah. Why? We've asked all these questions. So, you didn't need regulators to point it out. You just needed the recipients of the money, the Democratic Party, the U.S. government, no less, to make a basic common sense inquiry. See, why didn't the government look into whether or not those coins were any good? Oh, because they are the regulators. They are the lawmakers. Why would they do that? So, these are the brothers, interview with Altcoin Daily, Aaron and Austin. And again, they're very good. I've put their link below. So other cryptocurrencies they're suspecting were probably in on the scam. They're saying probably some of them were. A lot of them got caught up in it, and the reverberations, the contagions going all over the place. But some of them, you can't really explain how they didn't know this was happening. And so one of the things that they would do was they would pretend that they were coming to the aid of a bankrupting cryptocurrency or another exchange, and they would flood them with their FTT fake money. Supposedly, the people getting the fake money didn't know it. But, and this is how they would rip them off, is part of the deal was they had to give them all of their assets. Now, a lot of their assets, even though they're having trouble, were real. They were good. And so they confiscated all their assets while pretending to bail them out with fake money. This is a good scam. This is looking good. But here I think is where Altcoin Daily did a particularly good job. So you're wondering, right? How did Mr. Bankman-Fried have a relationship with none other than Gary Gensler? Gensler has been carrying on litigation for the last 2 years with a blockchain, cryptocurrency, and blockchain called Ripple. And Ripple stands to be a major player in world, the flow of the exchange of all currencies in the world, the currency exchange market, period. Ripple could be a massive player. And so Gensler is trying to declare them a security rather than a commodity so that he personally can regulate them. And right there, you're going to say, oh, okay, we see where that's going. So there's been a 2-year litigation there, right? So he's definitely litigating within the crypto sphere. I mean, he's very focused on it. So how did Bankman-Fried become a buddy of his? Well, step in Mr. Glenn Ellison. All right, MIT professor. MIT comes up a lot. Game theory, interesting, and industrial organization, both theoretical and practical. Graduated from Harvard. Okay, that's a bad sign right there. But what's important is that Gary Gensler, the head of the SEC, the regulatory body that wants to regulate crypto, was a protege of Mr. Glenn Ellison. Okay, so why is that important? Well, you see, remember this young lady here? We'll get to that. Actually, let's go there briefly right now. This young lady, Caroline Fisher Ellison, that's his daughter, who knows almost nothing worth knowing as far as running the biggest crypto exchange in the world and doing fundraising and research. And he becomes his partner in the research, fundraising, asset raising. Alameda company, sister company for FTX. Just happens to be his daughter. And he just happens to be his protege. And then Mr. Fried, banging the daughter, puts her in a good position, and becomes buddies with Gensler. Whoa, nice. Nicely done, huh? So I want to go back here now to her mother, because her mother's also an MIT graduate, Sarah Fisher Ellison, senior lecturer at MIT Economics Department. And she works in infectious diseases also in some of the papers that she writes. Right? That's a picture of her. Economics Department, degree from both Cambridge and MIT. She's been a fellow, blah, blah, blah. But she was at the Hoover Institute. Now, this is going to be interesting, and it's going to be intriguing, because we're going to realize some things about both Bankman-Fried and Caroline Ellison that's going to be kind of curious, especially when you consider that they're supposedly woke, but then you're going to see that. It's going to get very funny. I don't know if it's funny is the right word. So anyways, an economics guide to epidemiology. Damn, here comes epidemiology again. Models of infectious disease. Now remember, when I was doing all this, I'd already done all these notes. I did not know what I'm going to reveal at the end. So, but it started to occur to me, what's all this epidemiology keeps coming in here? And then his brothers in the, the COVID, epidemic prevention department. What's with COVID and the disease? Because that doesn't really show up in any of these charts, right? Well, okay, we're getting there. So the thing about Miss Fisher Ellison, is that she actually has a kind of a libertarian bent in her writings. So hold that thought, right? I can't develop it too much here, because I really have to. I've only just read like the topics and the abstracts. She seems to have a definite libertarian approach to economics and social work. And she doesn't really like social work, the social programs. And that's explainable here, the Hoover Institute. So then the husband, was he getting his daughter in there so that they would not get regulated? Because if that's the case, we're going to talk about that in a minute, it would mean that Sam Bankman-Fried pulled a stunt on both of them. That he really acted on his own and took Gensler, Ellison, the father, Ellison, the daughter, for a ride. We'll see. I mean, there's no way I can prove that now. So, oh yeah, we're getting to them. So before we do, let's take a look at another one. This is Elio Trades. Elio Trades is a very interesting guy too. Now he's on the more he loves gaming and the altcoins. So if you're wanting to get involved in crypto, let's say, but you want to do the safe routes, you don't want to spend that much time with it, that much research, you want to just look at what's basically safe and expand your portfolio, Elio Trades would not be the guy, especially the other guy, Becker, Alex Becker, that's a buddy of his. They really explore the really, they call it juicy low caps, where you can lose a lot of money or you can make tons of money. And they've done both. And they're especially fascinated because they make gaming. They're actually into gaming, creating games. They have their own company. And they're doing some really interesting work. I mean, I like these guys. I don't recommend them for a safe investor. You've got to have you have to have money that you're willing to lose. But, they've done pretty well. And I'm paying attention to them. The few things that I did well in crypto so far actually came from there. So let's take a look. What he is saying too, he's using the same flow chart. Yeah. Actually, I went ahead of my notes. I've talked about all this. Okay. So the thing about Elio, though, is he's looking more also into that the whole FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, is a criminal enterprise. And he thinks, like many, he should be in jail. He should be in jail. He's shocked that he's not been arrested because it's so blatant. I mean, the criminality is blatant. But Elio has to kind of eat a little crow because he, in fact, he's very popular. He's got a big following. I forget what it is here. Yeah, 580,000 people. And he could have had his choice of people to sponsor, and he chose FTX. And so he's actually been, promoting FTX. And now he was, believe me, he had his tail between his legs. He was very apologetic. Oh shit! And he lost about 200,000. I think it's genuine. This guy doesn't seem to be. I mean, what do I know? I think it was genuine. I think he was a. Again, he's basically he loves games. He loves altcoins. He loves crypto. I don't think he would be involved in the scam and then now just trying to distance himself from FTX, like pretending, oh, I lost money. I mean, I don't know he lost money. I didn't see the bank account, but he says he did, $200,000. So he also was using this chart and saying that this was the regulation, centralization, control. Well, this is mine. Regulation equals centralization equals control equals monopolization. He pointed to this chart as saying that this was a complete criminal scam run by these people. I'm entertaining the idea that Friedman took all of them for a ride and went around their back. But how did he get a lot of his stuff going as far as it did into the Democratic Party without the regulators, Mr. Here, knowing? That's a question. So he may have duped these two, but I doubt he duped him. And because these two seem to be more of the libertarian stripe, at least they seem to be, it could very well be that he actually wanted Friedman there to give crypto a good representation. Don't regulate it. But right away he started regulating it. I don't know. I'm only guessing here. It could be that all four of them were in on the scam from day one. We'll see what pans out. But both Elio and Altcoin Daily, because they're really insiders in all this, they pointed out some things a lot of other people were not aware of. First of all, there is this fellow here, Gary Wang. He was touted as one of the first or the youngest billionaire. And he was the main code writers for Bankman-Fried. And this is how Bankman-Fried, if you watch that thing, the interviews that he gave at the New York book deal, whatever that was, he kind of looked down and shuffled his feet and said, oh, I can't code. He said that before, so he couldn't have done all this. Well, this is nonsense. It's true that he can't code. This is the code master. However, he could not have done anything with Bankman-Fried not knowing it. That's absurd. But Gary Wang is the main coder for FTX, and they knew each other from college days. Again, SBF did not write any code. That doesn't mean he didn't know what Wang was doing. But Wang became one of the wealthiest under 30 billionaires in the world. And this might come to Bankman-Fried's, I don't know, help his case or not. But code was written while the FTX bankruptcy was being declared. And millions disappeared. Now, true, Bankman-Fried could not have done that. The question is, did Wang do that without Fried knowing? Okay. In fact, nobody knows that Wang did it either. I mean, could they have been hacked? At any rate, he's the obvious suspect. So there's another fellow in this saga. Now, Elio Trades brought this up because he cited an interview that was given to Marco Hodis on a live stream. And that is a fellow named Dan Friedberg, this fellow right here. He's the chief regulatory officer for FTX, or he was, which is very funny, the regulatory officer. He was involved in an online poker scam where they were cheating their own customers. It's exactly what FTX did. People would put their money on the platform to bet and play poker, and he was actually scamming their money. Maybe they were giving some kind of tokens or whatever that they would play with, you know, like poker chips. But eventually the poker chips were worth nothing because he was actually taking the real money and, I don't know, embezzling it is what I understand. So this guy was a chief regulator for FTX. I mean, in this sense, between Friedberg and Wang, who knows? Maybe Mr. Sam Bankman-Fried may be able to pull it off that he wasn't aware. I don't know. It's hard to imagine because he was running the whole show. Nonetheless, this does give a little bit of credibility. He's got a regulator who's a known thief and embezzler. What, Fried didn't know that? And then Wang, he has no criminal record at all. People are suggesting that whoever, took that money out just as the company was being bankrupt, it's hard to imagine anybody else could have done that. But other people could have. I mean, it could have been hacked. But again, these scams were not possible without backdoor access to the centralized blockchain. Now, they did require very skilled coding to put in place, but SBF claims he was not a coder and that he didn't know about the backdoor. But actually, he revealed he did know about it. Of course he did. But that he didn't manipulate it because he didn't know how to code. That doesn't sound too credible. And then we're going to look at the fellow, too, that is calling for this Dilla chair. He's pretty well known in the crypto world, and he's asking the question. Every day SBF is not behind bars. It becomes increasingly clear he served as an asset for the intelligence establishment used to severely stain public processions and impose overreaching regulations. That, yeah, he was a setup by the system, by the World Economic Forum, etc. This is what I'm thinking as well. It was a complete setup. And probably Ellison and his daughter may not have been involved in it. They thought they were doing the opposite. So SBF, the fact that he's not in jail is crazy. But it's even worse than that. It just happened tonight, right? But this is what happened tonight. When I wrote this, it was still like a week away, and everybody was thinking, well, he won't make it. He'll be in jail. But the way he was talking seemed like, no, he's going to be there. And the New York Times. It's called the Deal Book Summit. It'll be taking place November 30th. It's already been done, blah, blah, blah. And it'll include these three, right? I don't know what they have in common. What do they have in common? Well, never mind. Bankman, Zelensky, right? He's got time to take... Supposedly his country is just getting, devastating. People are dying, which they are. And he's got time for this? Oh, man. That's really wild. And Zuckerberg, you can understand. The fact that he's not in jail and he's there is bizarre. But look at this cast of characters. Fried, Zelensky, Fink, BlackRock, Ed Yellen, who was there when the last huge crash. I mean, this woman has been a disaster. And other than that, I'm not sure what these guys have in common. I don't know. Okay, well, anyways. So this is rich. Now here's where we get to some of the you know, how Caroline might have worked into this and her father, well, and Sam Bankman-Fried. So this is a tweet. I'm not sure the guy that he was having the conversation with, but this has been pointed out by a lot of people, including Turley and many others. This is established fact. This is a freezed, you know, screenshot of tweets that he actually did. So the interviewer is going, you know, you were really good at talking about ethics. For someone who kind of saw it all as a game with winners and losers, SBF says. Well, first he laughs. Yeah, it had to be. Here's the juicy part. I feel bad for those who get fucked by it, by this dumb game we woke Westerners play when we say all the right shibboleths, and so everyone likes us. A shibboleth is like a dated, what we would call a meme, but from a past era, that epitomizes certain antiquated ideas or ideas that are kind of ridiculous, right? But they were very au rigueur at the time, and they had a lot of traction at the time, and they've proven to be kind of stupid. That's a shibboleth. You know, you look back at these people's shibboleths. So you got to read that again. I feel bad for those who get fucked by it, by this dumb game we woke Westerners play when we say all the right shibboleths, and so everyone likes us. Remember? Effective altruism he was promoting. This stuff is beautiful. You can't make this up, right? I mean, this is just too good. So Friedman's actually Bankman-Fried, fraud and embezzlement. I mean, it's in your face. It's what it is. How's he not been arrested? So we've looked at the two charts, right? This is political world power plays, massive money laundering of US dollars and taxpayer money. And it shows just how corrupt Ukraine is. And it's time for people to look at what is that war really about. Okay, so this puts it on a whole different level. This flow chart is basically a flow chart of corruption, you know. Regulation equals centralization equals control equals monopolization. I don't think it ends here. And this was the question that I was asking myself. Is it just criminal, or is this way more? That this involves the attempts by the World Economic Forum, the basic globalist agenda to completely dominate, eradicate cryptocurrency as a competitor, and actually appropriate it in the form of CBDCs, centralized bank digital currencies, which I talked at length in the last videos, and I really recommend that you see them and follow up, because some of the videos that I took some of the material from is really excellent. So now we get to this. We have to ask a very basic question. Who are the adversaries of these organizations? Right, the World Economic Forum, the EU, the United Nations, the World Health. I mean, these are now, everybody should be able to at least be very suspicious, if not just absolutely determined to fight them, right? Because they're not what they say they are. They're not. This is global fascism emerging right in our faces. And with FTX, if this guy doesn't go to jail, they're laughing at us. They think we're funny. They think we're ridiculous, which is why they're going to engineer us, because they do think we're that stupid. If we allow it, maybe we are. Okay, so who are the adversaries of those organizations? Donald Trump and all the populist big leaders that have emerged in the last 5 years. Chief among them is actually Nigel Farage, who perhaps preceded Trump. Now, I want everybody here listening to this, in case you're liberals or whatnot, Trump did not create us. People need to dissuade themselves of that. We created Trump. Regardless of what happens to Trump, I wasn't even for him at the beginning. I didn't like him much. I thought that we had better choices in the Republican Party at the time. Then the more I learned about him, frankly, I think he's great. However, we created him. He saw that we were there. He did not create us. We don't think the way we think because of Trump. And most of the liberal establishment knows that, but they're going to try to convince other liberals that that's true. And it's a lie. It's ridiculous. We created Trump, not the other way around. So these other movements going on in the West, Nigel Farage, again, I think was actually the first guy, even before Trump. He's the one that steered the Brexit movement. We have Matteo Salvini, excellent guy, and now his partner Giorgia Meloni, who is now the Prime Minister of Italy. She is a firebrand. She is fantastic. Marine Le Pen, I don't care what people say about her. She's excellent. Viktor Orban. This has been one of the heroes of Europe, in this recent era. And there's many others. But Trump now is at the top. Trump is at the top of their enemies list. He is the definite threat, a thorn in the side of the Democratic Party, which is really not the Democratic Party of the United States any longer. It is not. You cannot say the Democratic Party represents the United States. It does not. It's a globalist party, and it's infiltrated the United States. And unfortunately, because of the universities, half the population is with them. So I don't, is a civil war in the making? Yes, it's in the making. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but yes. Trump is the biggest thorn in the side of both the United States government. Oh, the neocons. He's in there. He's a thorn in their side too, right? The Cheneys, the rest of them. EU, they hate Trump, and Trump pretty much hates them. And all these so-called Western liberal democracies. He's demonized by all of them. But among the populace, you wouldn't believe how popular Trump is in Europe. I know. Most of you liberals could not imagine that. He's hugely popular. Hugely popular. Yes, he is. Both Trump and cryptocurrencies, this is their other big nemesis. This could so destabilize the European Union project, the entire global economic project, Bitcoin especially. That's why they're going after it so hard. Both Trump and cryptocurrencies are a direct threat to the global elitists. Now, Trump at this time, unfortunately, doesn't support crypto at all. I'm hoping he'll come around. But nonetheless, Trump and crypto are without a doubt the biggest threats to the World Economic Forum and the Globalist Agenda. So we have to ask, is the FTX scandal more on the line of a Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme? And that's all it is. It's just criminality, proving that regulations don't really work. Just a con artist that had an amazingly lucky run, if only short-lived. And we'll see. Unlike his family didn't turn him in. I mean, who knows? Madoff may never have been arrested had his family not turned him in. He may have gotten away with it. I don't know. So, or was FTX more involved in global politics at the global centralization of power? I think the evidence is way heavier in that direction. Or in both, but definitely in that. I'm saying that at the very least, FTX is a major step in the crypto wars, and that the fall of FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried will serve as a trigger for massive cryptocurrency regulation and help pave the way for a United States central bank digital currency, a major step towards economic global fascism. And by the way, something has just come out on that in one of these last bills, they're paving the way for a central bank digital currency here in the United States. Yep. So, as I was going to say here, stay tuned. Something tells me that there's going to be a lot more to come with the FTX story, and I was going to get off with my outro. And I was going to leave you with this quote. But we're actually going to, wait a minute, stop. We have more. Oh, by the way, I skipped this, but I said everything needed to be said in it. Right? And basically what I'm saying is FTX playing as a part of the Great Reversal and the Great Reset. It's part of this struggle between the Great Reversal and the Great Reset. The Great Reversal being represented by Trump and, of course, began with our American Revolution and the Great American Experiment. And the Great Reset is the continuation of the demonic, psychopathic move towards the centralization of power and wealth into the hands of fewer and fewer people that culminated in the communist revolutions of the 20th century. Both socialist revolutions, including the fascists and the communists, both of them representing the culmination of the pyramids of power, of more and more power, more and more wealth accumulated at the very top of very steep social hierarchies. What, were people fooled or what? How many people you know that are liberals and pro-socialists understand that socialism is the culmination of absolute power, concentrated in the fewest possible hands? They don't. So anyways, let's take a look at this new edition that I just came across. Get my head out of the way. Here we go. FTX links to ivermectin. Oh man, can you believe it? Okay, my basic question against the entire story was wondering whether or not there was more to this FTX event, simply criminal or global. Recall the frequent inexplicable connections with the pandemic and his family and the World Economic Forum, right? Even the connections with the World Economic Forum were connections related to the pandemic with epidemiology and pandemic research, and his brother's direct relationship with collecting and cashing in on pandemic money. Okay? So this discussion came to my attention. They're a very cool couple, Dr. Brett Weinstein. Now, Brett Weinstein, I should have put a picture of him here. You might recognize him because he and his wife, Heather Haying, they were at the Evergreen State College. He was there from 2002 to 2017, which means he worked there 15 years. And the students got these really crazy leaders, these maniacs, who were talking about that they had to have a day, safe space day, with no white people, right? And so all the white people had to leave campus, students and teachers alike. Well, Brett, a 15-year professor there, refused to do it. So they came, they went after him, they screamed at him, they yelled at him, his wife too, she taught there. And at night, they were running around with baseball bats looking for any white students left over, but some of them were white, you see, the Antifa, right? Who hadn't left campus. Now, here's the irony, right? Brett Weinstein is Jewish. So imagine that the thugs coming looking for the white people still left on the campus are looking for a Jewish guy. I mean, the irony, right? Isn't that exactly what the brown shirts were doing? And remember, the brown shirts, as I pointed out earlier, were actually more communist than National Socialists, which is why Hitler got rid of them on the Night of the Crystal Knives. So here you have a college campus here in the United States, people walking around baseball bats looking to get rid of the white people. And one of the people, because he looks more, he doesn't look Ashkenazi, he looks more Sephardic, Mr. Weinstein. But he's white, passes for white. I don't know. That's a whole other subject, right? Are Jews white? Okay. They're looking for a Jew. Whether they saw it in those terms or not makes no difference. They should have known he's a Jew. I mean, his last name is Weinstein. And they're walking around with baseball bats. This is brown shirts. The fascist brown shirts, right? So anyways, he had to leave the college, but he got a settlement with them. You know, he didn't go without a fight. And hopefully they paid him well. And he and his wife have this, it's called Dark Horse podcast. It's on YouTube. And they've got a good following. Let's see how many, 427,000 subscribers. So they're doing pretty well. And here's what they're saying. Millions of FTX money went to funding an organization that conducts what they call the Together trials. Together trials, right? Effective altruism. No, they're linked to effective altruism. I don't know if that's an organization or not, but it's definitely a movement within the financial wokeness people. So the Together trials, which purported to have proved, right, they conduct supposedly scientific trials. And supposedly they prove the ineffectiveness of ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, right? Supposedly they proved it. Well, first of all, Weinstein goes in, he's what do they call it? Evolutionary biologist. And this guy is a scientist, total scientist. He's been teaching science all his life at a very deep level, the college level. And, he didn't want to get into politics. He's forced into it. He says that the tests were ridiculous. It's a complete setup. The results were announced. They announced what the results were going to be, in a sense. They were saying that these things were ineffective 6 months before the trial, before they conducted the trials. And he said the trials were completely bogus, the way they were conducted. And by the way, ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine had already been proven to have worked in the field where it counts. This is well known by all the doctors and nurses working with COVID patients. In fact, a bunch of nurses came to the Capitol, I think 2016 or 15, not sure, and they were protesting against this vilification and banning of hydroxychloroquine when they were saying it worked. In Africa, it worked. And one of the nurses happened to be black and from Africa. Like most of the nurses were not Africans per se. They were nurses. Most of them were white. They were led by a white nurse, but a lot of them were white. But there were a lot of people of color. And among the people of color was an African nurse. And she was really furious. And she gave this big speech. And she would say, we know it works, right? We use it. And then, of course, there have been doctors and nurses all over the country here in the US and in Europe that have been saying the same thing. And they were deplatformed by, of course, YouTube. Now, I'm going to do another video on that because I want to draw attention to a very good friend of mine that I think I'm not a good friend of mine, a guy that I followed a lot. I really like him, called Sanity for Sweden, who's been documenting all of the doctors and all of the nurses and all of the clinical workers who have been saying that these vaccines are not only not effective, they're causing a lot of deaths, and that the COVID lockdowns are a farce. And that's a whole nother subject, but we can look into that. Nonetheless, those of you who have been following it, if you have, you know that this is nothing new, right? That ivermectin worked. Look what happened to Joe Rogan just for saying it. And now everybody knows it works now. So this was back then. So they did this test, right? And they accused the black woman of being a voodoo practitioner. That's right. That's right. The liberals, the woke people, diminished this lady from Africa by saying, ugh, she's a voodoo practitioner. Okay. The Together organization trials were awarded, after the fact, $18 million. And they're part of the effective altruism movement. They were playing a major role in this. $18 million. Now, in the light of SBF's woke shibboleth cynicism, what do you make of this? Where did that money come from? His brother just happened to have suddenly come up with a Guardians of Epidemics. You think they had anything to do with this? FTX is putting money into his fake money, right? And then they get awarded $18 million. But that $18 million they're awarded is real money. It's not FTT coin. It's real money. So what do you think? Are we going to see coming up in the near future another one of those laundry cycles where some of that money is going to go back to his brother or back to him, right? Send millions. How many millions? Well, I think it's at 200 million. But remember, it's probably 200 million fake money. And then for conducting this phony test, they get 18 million of real money. And they can send back some of that real money to the people who helped, fund the research before everybody found out the money was. Well, see, when they find out the money is no good, it's the taxpayer that's going to take the brunt of this, right? If the organization, if they're backed up, by the government or whatever organization is who put this up, if that billions of dollars from FTT is no good, they don't actually lose anything. They're spending the money like Weinstein said. That's a lot of money to conduct. That's a lot of money to run these trials. I mean, they got way overpaid. So they came out just great. If anybody's going to come out bad, it's going to be taxpayers or whoever put money into the program. I don't know anything about that. But whatever it is, are we going to see one of these cycles, laundry cycles, where the money's going to come right back to FTX? Or probably to his brother. At any rate, it's too good, right? I mean, you can hardly make this stuff up, right? I mean, it's rich, isn't it? So, I want to leave you with the wonderful words of Mr. Sam Bankman-Fried. It's beautiful. I feel bad for those who get fucked by it, by this dumb game we woke Westerners play when we say all the right shibboleths, and so everyone likes us. Effective altruism. And he's a vegan. An excellent novelist could not have come up with a better story. And of course, you gotta love the term woke shibboleths and effective altruism. You gotta love it. You gotta love it.